There was a time in history when Bobby Fischer was so dominant with one opening that everybody refused to even play it against him. For years, Fischer would go to tournaments and play his best by test move, pawn to e4. He would face a large variety of responses, from the Caro-Kann to the French defense, the Perk defense, and the King's pawn opening. But nobody would ever dare to play the Sicilian defense. Bobby Fischer would tell the media that the Soviets were scared of him and would not choose to play the Sicilian, which would lead to one of the most famous videos in chess history. During the 1959 Candidates Tournament in Belgrade, Bobby Fischer would play his usual move, pawn to e4. His opponent, Mikhail Tal, would place his pawn to c6, gesturing a Caro-Kann defense, before moving it one step further to c5 for the Sicilian. In today's video, we are going to be analyzing exactly how Bobby Fischer crushed the Sicilian every single time and caused all his opponents to fear playing it against him ever again. Let's get right into it. Bobby Fischer's first opponent was Grandmaster Samuel Reshevsky. Reshevsky was widely considered one of the best players in the 1950s, and look at this picture of him playing a simultaneous exhibition when he was just 8 years old. So you know this is a very strong opponent. Fischer of course opened with one e4, we saw c5, Bobby Fischer brings his knight out and we saw knight to c6. Here Fischer played d4, striking in the center as you do in the Sicilian. There was an exchange and g6. So Samuel Reshevsky went for the accelerated dragon variation, attacking the knight on d4. So Fischer simply developed his bishop to defend the knight. Now we saw knight to f6, and Bobby Fischer implemented his most famous move. If you study Bobby Fischer's Sicilian games, he always plays this one move, developing his light squared bishop to c4. And he always did this so much that they actually named a variation after him called the Fischer-Sozin attack. And I implemented this very move in my own game a few months ago to defeat an FM. So make sure while you're studying these games, you know these openings so you can implement them into your own games. Here Samuel Reshevsky castled and Bobby Fischer played bishop to b3. So Samuel Reshevsky in this position, he had a great idea. He said, well, since this bishop on the light squared diagonal is so strong, what if I simply get rid of it? He played knight to a5, trying to get rid of that bishop. But this move stopped defending a very important square and Bobby Fischer played pawn to e5, attacking the knight. This knight is forced to move. It cannot really go to h5 because then simply pawn to g4 would trap the knight. So the knight went back to e8, but the game is already completely over and Bobby Fischer played the amazing move, bishop takes f7. Now in the game we saw rook takes, and then after knight to e6, the queen was just trapped. But what would happen if we saw the move king takes? Well, now we would see the exact same thing, knight to e6. This is actually a brilliant move. And if pawn takes, then the queen is just hanging again. But what if king takes? If the king decides to take, we would see the move queen to d5 check, king f5 is forced, g4 check, king takes, rook g1, king h5, and here would come queen to g2. White is threatening 3 different checkmates. There's no way to defend all of them, and the game would simply be over. Let's see the next game. Bobby Fischer's second opponent was Peter Dely with the rating of 2,490. This was no weak player, and let's see how Bobby dealt with his Sicilian. Of course, we have e4, c5, knight to f3, d6, d4, and which variation of the Sicilian are we going to see? Knight to c6. This is the classical. In the last game, we saw the accelerated dragon, but now we have the classical Sicilian. And what move did Bobby Fischer do? Of course, he brought his light squared bishop to c4. Now, this is the official position for the Fischer-Sozin attack, if anybody is interested. Here, black played e6. I really like this move, trying to blunt the diagonal of the bishop. But we're gonna see how Bobby Fischer forced his way through this structure. He first started with bishop to b3. You'll notice whenever Bobby Fischer puts his bishop on c4, the next move he tucks it away to b3 where it is more safe. Here, black played pawn to a6, and Fischer starts to try and break down the structure, pawn to f4. This move is played to play pawn to f5. Fischer wants to destroy this pawn on e6 to open up the scope for his light-squared bishop. Queen to a5 was played. Now black is threatening this pawn, but Fischer simply gets out of the pin by castling. Now Peter Dely played knight takes knight, queen takes, and here he played d5. Now, if you are not careful, d5 comes with a very big threat, and that threat is bishop to c5, which would pin your queen to the king. But Fischer has a very, very convenient way of defending this. Bishop to e3. He was going to do this move anyway. Now Peter Dely decided he wants to exchange off some pieces. Knight takes e4, knight takes, pawn takes. And here I love Fischer's next move. He doesn't waste time taking back the pawn. No dilly-dallying. He decides to break open the structure, pawn to f5. This was his plan from the start. He's trying to make this light-squared bishop an absolute beast on this diagonal. Peter Dely now played queen to b4. He's offering an exchange of queens, and Bobby Fischer declines that trade in a very effective way. He plays pawn takes e6. So now if you do take this queen, there would be an in-between move delivering a check first, and only then would you take back the queen. So Peter Dely is not in time to exchange queens. He decided to take back. Bobby Fischer took, and exactly the same reason you cannot trade, because bishop takes f7 in between move protected by the rook, and then I will take being up a piece. So Peter Dely took back this bishop, and now Fischer played an absolutely brilliant move. Rook takes f8. And the idea was, if you take back this rook with your rook or with your king, then nobody is defending this queen and it will simply be taken. So black is forced to take back with the queen, and Fischer played queen to a4 check. After b5, now he took the pawn, attacking the rook. The rook went to d8. We saw the move, queen to c6 check, and after rook to d7, Fischer added more pressure with rook to d1, queen e7, and Bobby Fischer made his opponent resign with this next move, bishop to b6. Well, why did black resign in this position? Well, simply there is no way to stop the next move, queen c8, and winning the rook. For example, if you did something like castling in this position, then the rook would just be hanging and you are free to take it. If you move the king, same thing. And next move, if you do something random, queen to c8 check, you cannot block because the bishop is here. And when you move the king, that is simply a free rook. What a beautiful game by Fischer. Let's move on to the last game. Bobby Fischer's next opponent was Jovan Sofrevski. Pawn to e4, pawn to c5. Of course, this is a Sicilian video. And which variation of the Sicilian did we see? We saw the classical Sicilian. This is the exact same position we had in the last game we analyzed. In that game, black had gone for a6 and gone for some queenside expansion, but in this game, black wisely decided to play bishop e7 and to castle his king to the king side. Now, Bobby Fischer always likes to attack, so he wants to castle to the opposite side of his opponent and got his queen out the way by playing queen to e2. Here we saw queen to a5. Black is sneakily threatening this pawn on e4, but Fischer simply castled. We saw knight takes knight, bishop takes knight, and bishop to d7. So yeah, black's position looks pretty fine, like all his pieces are developed, and he's maybe gonna bring a rook to the c-file, and Fischer takes time out just to play this simple move, king to b1, getting his king to safety. We saw now the move rook to d8, and here Fischer played queen to e3. This is a very nice move, threatening the a7 pawn, and for example, if this pawn moves to a6, we would see bishop b6 with a fork. So in the game, black decided to play b6, blunting this diagonal, and here Fischer played a very nice move, bishop takes knight. And what's his idea? Well, if you take back with the bishop, then the pawn on d6 is simply hanging. I will bring my rook to d1, and white is just a pawn up. So, in the game, what black decided to do, he took with the g pawn, trying to hold on for dear life to this pawn. But as you know, you cannot open up your king against a player like Bobby Fischer. And Bobby Fischer played one of the most brutal moves I have ever seen in my entire life in this position. Pause the video to try and solve it. But if you just want to enjoy the show, look at this move. Knight to d5. Well, what is the idea of this move? In the game, we saw the move rook to e8. But what would happen if black had simply taken this knight? Well, now Fischer would play the move rook takes pawn, and after queen to a6, Fischer would play rook to h5, and there is no way to stop this idea of queen to h6 and queen takes h7. So, black decided to play rook to e8. Now Fischer ended the game in very, very swift style. Knight takes bishop, rook takes knight, rook takes d6. Black played rook to c8 to get out the pin, and here Fischer played a beautiful double attack, queen to d4, attacking the bishop and the pawn on f6. Black decided to save his bishop, and after queen takes f6, here black simply resigned the game. Well, why did he resign? I looked at this variation rook to c7, and I thought that after this, white would have an easy win with rook to d3. The computer said I'm crazy and you should just play rook to d1 and improve this rook. But also rook to d3, there's no way to stop rook to g3, and white would simply win this game. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to smash that subscribe button for more old Grandmaster games, and I'll see you guys in the next one.